Good afternoon. I'm Jim Eskin. On behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, it's a privilege and pleasure to welcome you to number 111 in our nonprofit empowerment webinar series. This one is fundraising by introverts, and we think that we have the number one authority on the planet on that subject. We're thrilled to bring back as our subject matter expert Brian Saber, who just wrote a fascinating book. He's also president of Asking Matters, and he just wrote this fascinating book, as you see behind him, Fundraising for Introverts. He is a self-admitted introvert, though I got to tell you, some of me wants to question that because of all the things that you do. But in the interest of time, I have a 6-page CV on him. I'm going to boil it down to one paragraph. Do you mind, Brian? We'll bring you on in a second.
Okay.
Through research and 38 years of fundraising, in which he doesn't look that old to be doing 38 years of fundraising, but I think he started when he was a student at Brandeis. Brian, he dispels misunderstanding and brings really greater clarity to the subject of personality types and fundraising success. And we think over the next hour that introverts and extroverts alike will be enriched. John, can we put up, first I'd like to put up our nonprofit North Star nomination slide. Brian, we have just gotten in the podcast business and we're enjoying it. We have released 3 of them. We have 7 in the can. That's a nice thing about podcasts. You can get ahead. Our form is pretty easy. We're really looking for unsung heroes. And John, if you could scroll down, it's really, I don't know about you, I don't like hard to do forms. We're just going to ask for basic contact information on you and your nominee. And then there are 2 questions. I think the 250 words. Stop there, John, please. Describe how your nominee is making a difference. And if possible, use measurable impacts. And also in a few sentences, describe why your nominee is inspirational. So we're welcoming you nominate and you determine who's going to be featured in our podcast series. And I'd like to introduce a colleague. We can bring her out. Randa Luna used to serve with me on the AFP board in San Antonio. She ran north to Austin, and she is a Brian, it hurts me how much she knows at a young age, but she is particularly knowledgeable about fundraising and the performing arts. And I got to tell you, coming from higher education, oh man, I'll take higher education any day than fundraising and the performing arts. And she's done a great job. She is going to do a couple of things. She's going to remind me of the times. More important, she's going to introduce people who would like to ask questions. And Brian is offering 3 autograph books for people who come on camera. You got to come on camera because by the way, there are 3 ways you can interact with us. You can type into the chat box, you can type into the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand and come on camera. Brian, congratulations on your newest book. That's number 4. So you're 3 ahead of me. Fundraising for Introverts, Harnessing Our Powers for What Matters. For decades, you've been preaching that introverts can not only be effective fundraisers, they even enjoy strategic advantages over extroverts. So what new ground do you cover in your 4th book?
What do I count? Okay. Well, there have been a lot of books written about introversion now. I think Susan Cain's being the most widely known. That came out about 10 years ago, changed my life. It is called Quiet, the Power of an Introvert in a World That Can't Stop Talking.
Hmm.
Love the title. So there have been a lot of books about introverts lately, and certainly in the last 50 years, there have been tons of books about fundraising. As a matter of fact, one of our buddies, Pam Grow, you probably
Yeah.
have heard of
Yeah.
Pam.
Yeah. Sure.
She said, when I asked her to read the book, and she said, just when I thought we didn't need another book in fundraising, you wrote this one. The point being that I think I'm putting the two together is really what's new. Devoting an entire book to half of the population that constantly is undervalued, devalued, stereotyped in a non-productive way, I think is what's really new. And I really took the time, though I am an introvert, and through the asking styles, which some of your viewers will know probably from our first
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, podcast together. I've been studying introversion for a while, but I really dug in deep. Whereas my other books were a matter of sharing what I was teaching, putting to words what I was teaching. This book really involved figuring a lot of things out, including truly understanding the science behind introversion,
Mm.
because there are so many misconceptions about what it is and what it isn't. And I felt I needed to really scientifically and methodically make the case. And I think that's what's different. Marrying the two and really making the case for introverts in our field.
Yeah. Yeah. But we're not going to send all the extroverts off to the moon, are we?
No, we're not. We need everyone, right?
Yeah. Okay,
Uh,
let's go back to square one. Could
sure.
you please define the differences between an extrovert and introvert,
Yes.
and how black and white are these differences?
Right. So, first of all, we're all on a spectrum. So, I know someone at the top said both, Patricia. And we're we all have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, right? And the question is really the balance. Some people are uber something. Some people are sort of in the middle. They call those in these terms ambiverts or
What was that
multiverts.
word?
Ambivert.
Okay, I got one for the
Ambivert.
cocktail party if I get
Yeah,
invited to it.
ambiverts. I've heard multiverts. There's a third term. And then some of us are uber at the other end,
Yeah,
which is where the stereotypes come from, right? They see someone who can't stop talking and has to
yeah,
be out and partying all the time as the extrovert. And they see someone who never wants to socialize, always wants to stay home as the introvert,
yeah.
neither of which is true. Where we fall depends on what's more dominant, and it comes down to our how we think
Hmm.
and how we synthesize information.
And by the
And
way, you're saying it's how we think, it's not what others think of us. Is that right?
correct. It's actually scientific. It's scientific. We are what we are because of how we're made. So there are a few things that affect that. It has been shown that introverts have longer neural pathways. When introverts are asked a question and need to come up with an answer or need to just figure out a solution, introverts have a longer thought process and go deeper into their memories to come up with an answer. Whereas extroverts don't go as deep and use more of what's right in front of them, what's current, than history. So that causes introverts to want to pause and think before answering.
Hmm.
So one of these dichotomies is that extroverts think to talk, they think on their feet, whereas extroverts, yeah, talk to think, so they process out loud, whereas introverts think to talk. We
Mm.
want to stop and think and talk. As I learned this, I realized that forever, and if anyone on the call has this challenge, let me know. I would say something too quickly, and then I would repeat it
Mm.
in a better way, in a
Hmm.
more complete way, because the first time through, answering on the spot like this, I didn't have enough time to process and answer the question the way I wanted to. Whereas the extrovert could and was happy with the answer as it came out. Right. So I've had to train myself not to repeat myself. So we like a slower rhythm, and part of what uses up our energy is having to speed that up in a conversation. Like even this conversation between us, it will use a lot of my energy because I can't pause as much as I might naturally want to, because it would create an awkwardness in the conversation and a lot of quiet moments, and we need to keep the conversation going. But that uses a lot of my energy. The second piece that's scientific has to do with dopamine and acetylcholine. And I won't get
help me again. What was that word?
Dopamine, which a lot of people have heard of, the dopamine effect that gets you all excited, and acetylcholine. Now, most people have heard of dopamine, or a lot of people have. That's what athletes get, that dopamine effect where they get that rush and such. Yeah. Very few people have heard of acetylcholine. Well, it turns out extroverts respond more to the dopamine in their bodies. Introverts, the acetylcholine. Dopamine is the external feel-good enzyme. So people who have reactive dopamine get a lot of reaction from external forces, positive reactions.
Yeah.
Whereas introverts who are more responsive to the acetylcholine get more of a response, more feel good from what they feel inside and experience inside. It's more internal than external, which is why introverts can spend more time by themselves and find joy in that, and why they need to rest and recuperate after too much interaction. So it's scientific. That's what makes someone an introvert versus an extrovert. It's the way their body is composed. And people say, like Haley was just saying, extrovert on the surface, introvert otherwise. We all play roles in life. Yeah. We're all, depending on the situation, we use a part of our personality. We act a certain way. We're responsive if we've got good listening and skills and we're paying attention. We respond to the person who's with us, and we act right. We form relationships and we bring something different to each of them. So we may feel like we're being more extroverted when we're really more introverted. That's the most common one, right? We introverts go beyond our comfort zone to interact more fluidly, more often, and that's challenging. Anyway, I think that's all the science for today, but it really is science. Yeah. We are what we are. People say, can you change over time? You don't really change. So there's a little bit of research now that says that you actually become a little more introverted with age. But what I think they're actually saying is you become a little more comfortable with yourself, by yourself, less into new experiences overall and meeting new people. And that feels more introverted because, in fact, we know that our genetic makeup stays the same.
Yeah. So fascinating. This leads right into our next question. Have you discovered any similarities in the childhoods of extroverts and introverts, such as being the firstborn or being the youngest? Or how about the influence of parents who are extroverts or introverts?
Well, that would only influence how you respond. Right. If you're an introvert and you have very extroverted parents, it's probably going to make you recede even further into the background and get quieter. Yeah. Introverts often get quieter around extroverts. And extroverts have to be careful not to drown out introverts in terms of energy and conversation and spotlight and such. I don't know about firstborn, secondborn. We know the firstborn gets more attention. The secondborn is competing with the first, but so if you're an extrovert, this is all now I'm hypothesizing. Yeah. If you're the secondborn, and you're an extrovert, maybe you'll fare better competing with your older sibling than if you're an introvert. Um, I was a middle child, and added to that, I was an introvert, and I spent a lot of time in my room by myself. I was the
Yeah.
quiet one in the family. My older and younger brothers were the boisterous ones,
Yeah.
more extroverted than I. Certainly, my younger brother was the most extroverted, um, and that probably served him well in getting a lot of attention. Right. If I were the youngest, it would have been even harder. So I don't know. That's just some pop
I've
theory on my
included,
part, but
I was the youngest and I had two older siblings, and my parents, I felt everybody was an extrovert, and it meant there was just no space left for another extrovert, really.
well, you can start to compete with each other, right?
Yeah.
Whereas introverts tend not to.
Yeah.
And there's a different rhythm to a conversation if you've got two extroverts, which gets to fundraising, right? If you're a donor and a fundraiser and you're both extroverts, okay, you're going back at, you're keeping up with each other. If your donor is an introvert and you as the fundraiser are an extrovert, you have to really figure out how to put the brakes on it and leave space for the donor to speak, right? To ask questions and be quiet more than might be natural for
We're
you
going
as
to
an extrovert.
dig in a little deeper there, but we're going to shift gears along with our mentor, Andrea Kilstead. You are well known for introducing the four asking styles that I think
Yeah,
I see not far behind you. Could you
right.
take a few minutes to review them for our audience?
Sure. So, at the core of Asking Matters is this concept of the asking styles that we created. That's what started all of this 13 years ago now.
Hmm.
And we based the styles on two personality characteristics. One, how you interact, which we've pretty much covered now, right? Introversion and extroversion. And two, how you think. Are you analytic? Do you start with data and then from there derive an idea? Or are you intuitive? Do you have a gut? And then you see if the data supports it. Gee, was my hypothesis right? Was my gut right? The introversion extroversion impacts how you interact with people, how comfortable you are meeting new people, whether you prefer the telephone or email, all sorts of things. And the analytic intuitive dichotomy impacts why you care about your organization, how you evaluate it yourself in terms of what's important to you, and how you're going to talk about it to others.
Hey, you
When
got
we
four asking styles. I'm butting in. That's the extrovert part of me. I never had the guts to butt in when I was a little kid. I got it
okay,
now. Um, how does extroverts and introverts fit into your four blocks of asking styles?
yes. Well, the two on the top of the extroverts, you might be able to read on these axes the words.
Oh, yeah.
Rainmaker and go-getter are the extroverts, and mission controller and kindred spirit are the introverts. So the rainmaker is the analytic extrovert who is the strategic, competitive, driven, very focused person, very objective, very matter of fact. The and when I say that, meaning has the most of those characteristics. We all have a little bit of each. The go-getter is the big picture thinker who really engages people through their energy and enthusiasm, gets them on board through that excitement. The kindred spirit, the intuitive introvert, of which I'm one, is the feelings oriented person, wears their heart on their sleeve, and because they tend to be sensitive, are very sensitive towards others. Want to make sure the other person is heard, the other person feels valued and seen, which is important with our donor relationships. And then the fourth, the mission controller, is the analytic introvert, the one who keeps their eye on the prize methodically and systematically, always has a plan, and also is the best listener, most likely to sit back, listen, and observe and learn from observing. And of course, listening is probably the number one skill in all of fundraising.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are the four, and the two that are introverted again are mission controller and kindred spirit.
Yeah. Yeah.
but you can be a mix. Actually, we have this quiz, as you know, Jim, 30 question
Yeah.
quiz, and the results give you two quadrants, a primary and a secondary. So you could be primarily mission controller and secondarily rainmaker, which means you're still more on this introverted side than the extroverted, but you're very analytic,
Yeah.
right? Or you could be go-getter and kindred spirit. You can be go-getter and rainmaker, right? You can be very extroverted, more very introverted. I'm a kindred spirit mission controller, which means the introversion dominates as a characteristic. How I interact is very important to me, and I do have a lot of organization and planning if I need to use it. I often go with my gut, but I often also get asked to lead things because people know I'm well organized. And
Yeah.
that's how I sort of describe that relationship. Where are you? I know you've taken this. Go getter.
I'll go on. I like meeting strangers. I
Yes.
started as an introvert and, I moved away. I think I think, God, I ask you boxers or briefs. So I'll say this. I think all my life I've been chasing a stage. And maybe it started because I was in a household of all extroverts and there was no space for me to talk.
Mm.
But
So,
I know I like meeting strangers. My wife says,
oh,
boy, are you an extrovert.
wow. That is very extroverted. By the way, there's extroversion, introversion, and there's shyness, and those get conflated. And I spend
Yeah.
time in the book talking about them because they both have the same result, which is more alone time, not meeting as many new people and such. But shyness has to do with the fear of being judged. The opposite of shyness is an extroversion, it's being outgoing, having the confidence to be outgoing. So you can be outgoing but introverted. You can be extroverted, but you can still be a little shy. So it's and though, as I said, they get conflated, but if you can pull the shyness out, um, then that is different. But again, I mean, you could be and right, you were an extrovert growing up. You just didn't have a chance with four others. It was four
Yeah.
to one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. They
when you
might be
finally,
listening too, so I don't want to get in trouble. Okay. Um, you talked about the impact of the pandemic, which is something that we have experienced nothing like it in our adult lives.
yes,
So, 100 years from now, they'll look back at this pandemic. And you said
yes,
that introverts, as you might guess, would have an advantage during the pandemic and the quarantine and the social distancing. Do you think as a result of the pandemic, we now have more introverts or more extroverts?
neither, because
What?
people are what they are. Because we're still the same genetically.
Wow. That
There,
astounds me. I got to get you.
no,
That
uh,
just astounds me.
I mean, it doesn't. So here's what people had to learn how to be on their own, how to be by themselves, spend more time by themselves. They were forced to. Many people were forced to. But so it means that some extroverts develop coping skills
Yeah.
that they didn't have, or um, they might have learned, gotten an aha moment about how some quality alone time could be great. But that doesn't make them less extroverted.
Yeah.
It may just make them a little more comfortable being by themselves.
Yeah.
They're still extroverts. Introverts had an easier time. I'm pretty sure I say in the book, and it is true, in the first year, I did more than 1,000 piece jigsaw puzzles without looking at the picture. Now, I opened the box, I saw the box, and it's like, oh, there's a picture. And then I put the picture away. And for 3, 4 days, it didn't matter. I never looked at the picture and I didn't work on memorizing it. I just knew generally this was a cityscape, this was a beachscape, this was what a bunch
You
of
got a
coffee
good
mugs.
education at Brandeis, by God.
Now, that has nothing to do with it. It has to do with my mind and the patience I have to look at all these different combinations and figure out a solution. Because I'm willing to go deep. I'm willing to just sit there by myself and stare at this thing. And I must have spent 6 hours, 7 hours a day puzzling by myself. right? Hard for an
Was
extrovert
it
to,
fun? Was it satisfying?
well, introverts are less likely to use the word fun, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, that was fun. That was fun. Okay, well, fun is okay. That's one descriptor. I have an enjoyable time. I don't often say something was fun.
Yeah.
It's not as much in my lexicon. It was satisfying.
Okay.
It because it just it I like I like I liked the solitude. I liked the challenge of it. I was challenging myself. I wasn't challenging others. I'm not big on competition. So yeah, so things like that work well. And another thing, I see people agree, hearing themselves in this. And by the way, I'm very happy we have extroverts with us today, because part of this is learning how to work together,
Yeah.
right? Both of us. But uh, but I just lost my train of thought on that. I'll have to come back to it. I actually
I
just went out
lost
of
you
my
out of the
mind.
puzzles. I can't imagine you putting those puzzles together without knowing what it looked like.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Randa, do
very
we have
methodical.
a question from the audience? We got 3 books. If someone comes on camera, do we have somebody who would like to come on camera?
I'm waiting for a request, but it is
Hey,
4:30, so
Okay.
I
raise your
wanted to.
hand, and
Yeah.
Brian is going to put away his puzzles and autograph a book for you and ship it to you. Okay. So it's a great book. And let me know if I have it.
I have it right here. And it's not that big either.
No, it's
It's
good. Yes, right
easy
here.
to read.
Yeah, it is.
And that is me on the cover with the bag on my head.
Really.
I had a lot of fun doing that
Your
photo shoot.
nickname is not the Bagman, is it?
No, but that would be good. I had a lot of fun doing that, bringing in all these different
Yeah.
shopping bags and
Yeah.
seeing which ones to
Randa,
put on my head.
Brian's ready to
Um,
give away some books.
okay.
Folks, all you have
Well,
to do
there
is
are
raise your
some.
hand and come on
So,
camera.
Jim, here's the interesting thing. We're going to change that rule.
Okay.
We're going to change that rule. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Because introverts don't want to get on camera.
Oh, I was
And
afraid you were
that's
going to
not
say that.
fair.
Why?
And mostly we have introverts. So we're going to change that. I'm changing the rule on the fly, if that's okay.
Okay.
And we're going to go to the 3 interesting first questions that are typed in.
I'll
'Cause
say we're not going to go to New York for a ruling, okay? Like a football game or something. You can change it on the fly so they can type
I'm
their
changing it.
questions in the Q&A box. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So in the
And
chat.
Randa's going to share the questions. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we
Would
have a
you-
few. We have someone who will go on camera.
It looks like I've got one. Patricia,
Okay, come
asked a
on.
great question.
Okay.
Can we bring
See?
Patricia on?
Patricia, okay. And
Patricia.
Haley said, I'm such an introvert, I'm going to buy the book so I don't have to go on camera. But I'm going to give a book to Haley because she asked one of the best questions early on.
Okay,
And that
by
is,
the way,
what are the
Randa
best ways
is going to do a private chat with Haley to get her mailing address. So Brian can limp
Right.
down to UPS and get that book out tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, so
Well, don't say
Haley,
tomorrow, but
congratulations. But
shortly.
Patricia's, let's meet Patricia.
Okay. Show us. Patricia, come on.
Come on down.
Let's see. We need to see your face. And let me just say,
Patricia
Haley,
declined, just so you know, Patricia declined to come on camera.
she just
Probably
did. Okay.
because she lost the incentive because Brian changed the rules on the fly. But Patricia, do you want to type a question in the chat space or Q&A space and get your autograph book? Okay.
Her question is
question.
See, I love this because we're learning so much just on the fly, seeing how people interact.
Yeah.
I would never go on camera for a book. I wouldn't go on camera for I don't think I'd go on camera for a $500 Amazon gift card. I just don't think I'd.
Hey, when you get that opportunity, call me and I'll
Yeah,
take
right.
advantage of it. Okay. What do we have? Hey, Patricia,
But let me
are you
answer.
ready? Okay, Patricia, did we get a question from Patricia?
Yeah. Well, we
Yes,
do have some questions. Yeah, I see them. So let me start with some of them. How
Okay,
about that?
please do, Bart.
I want to start with from Faith Lutheran Church. I'm not sure what your name is. I don't think it's Faith. I think that's Faith Lutheran Church. How to get others on board to fundraise on the board. I do a lot of work on this. I actually might encourage you to buy my third book, which is called Engaged Boards Will Fundraise, because it not only talks about how to engage them, but what is good fundraising and what is not. I think one of the problems we have in our field is that we ask board members to step on their relationships and swap gifts with friends, beg for gifts, arm twist, get into all these awkward situations. And I don't think that's fair. And I don't think it's good fundraising. It's very transactional. You end up having to repeat yourself a lot. I hear board members then say, I don't have anyone else to ask. I've gone through my whole list. The way to get board members to fundraise is to make it relationship based, where their biggest role isn't asking for the money, but building the relationships. I would almost guarantee that everyone on here today is working for a small to mid-sized nonprofit that has no fundraising staff or one or two. Yeah. And you're never going to be able to build all the individual relationships with such a small staff. That's why we need our boards. And I think when we explain it to our boards that way, and we ask them to help us build the relationships by reaching out to our donors, asking them to coffee, sending them personalized updates when they hear some great news at the organization, and bringing them on tours of your facilities if you have them. Those are great ways for board members to be involved. And I think more board members will do that work. And it's better work because what you want is to build donors who have relationships with the institution and will stay for a really long time. And when board members go out and ask all their friends, they make one or two obligatory gifts and leave. So it's a lot of time and work spent on transactional gifts, and I would call them transitional gifts. So that would be in a quick nutshot, a quick screenshot, whatever the phrase is, about board members and getting them to fundraise. I'll say one more thing though: they need training. They need training.
And they can get it right here, by the way, from Mexican Fundraising Training.
You can. Yes, you can. You can go to Jim for it.
Out. And by the way, help me keep count, Randa. Have we awarded 3 books yet?
Just 2. And I do have Patricia's
you type in something. Written. I know it was Patricia and Haley. And I see they've been given their addresses, folks. Brian has a 3rd book he's ready to autograph. And he'll get it down to UPS or mail priority as quick as he can. Folks, do we have a question? I have a question and I'm itching to ask Brian. Okay, because they're waiting. This one really, I'm itching to ask you.
But then I'm going to go back to the chat. I'm going to go back to the chat because I'm seeing there's some other questions.
Okay, but I have to get to a question. I'm itching to ask you. Itching. What's the chat?
Oh, okay. In the chat. So the second is, what are the best ways for an introvert to fundraise? Haley says. The best way is to be yourself, because everyone can form relationships, extrovert, introvert. And one of our special skills we have as introverts is that we like fewer but deeper relationships, right? We don't want to go to parties and interact with a lot of people. If you're like me, if I have to go to an event, I find one person to talk to the whole time. That's a real introvert skill. And that's what builds.
You all should get married and stay married for like 60 years. Okay.
And we do. Use the skills you have, the number one of which is building deep, committed relationships, thoughtful relationships, where you're listening and really getting to know each other. Be proud of your listening skills, because in a conversation, you're either talking or you're listening. Hopefully you're listening. If you're not talking, you're not zoned out. And extroverts have to pull back on their talking to listen more. And we have that. I also talk about partnering. We don't have to do a lot of this work alone. And I mean, you may not have a lot of choices in terms of who you can partner with, but you might think of, well, I'm an introvert. Who do I know who's more extroverted who can go out on that call with me? And maybe we can tag team.
And by the way, the classic model is a board member who has a relationship with the donor prospect and a staff person who's going to take notes and know, how many percent of this and that. So do you recommend, when possible, making sure there's balance, that one's an extrovert and one's an introvert?
Yes. However, I spent most of my career in small nonprofits. I did spend 80 years with my alma mater, and those were that I had a lot of support there. But in a small organization, we don't necessarily have a lot of choice. I'm an executive director and I have to go with my board chair on this call, or a board member opened the door, so I'm going with the board member. Right. Or maybe I'm an executive director and I have to go with my director of development. So you may not have a choice. If you do, great, choose someone who's diagonally across from you so you've covered the bases. I do think that makes for a strong team. But assuming you have someone you have to go with, and this comes back to your initial questions, Jim, what's your asking style and what's your boss's asking style? Once you know your two styles, you have a better sense of how to work together productively. Yeah. And you might have a sense of how you then would work with a donor, right? If you're an introvert.
Do you find that most people really know what they are? If they're an introvert, they know they're an introvert. If they're an extrovert, they know it. Do most people how to know it? Or am I an introvert and I'm going to really say I'm an extrovert because I think that will be better for my career? Do you think people are honest in admitting that?
I think most people are, but look, in life, there are some people who cover up for various reasons.
Yeah.
Who see themselves differently. Sometimes I'm running a seminar and someone says, I was surprised to find out on this. And I see the person next to that person going, a friend of theirs saying, oh, no, you got them exactly. That's exactly what they are. Some people don't see themselves as clearly as others see them. So there are these discrepancies along the way, but assuming we have a decent idea of who we are, right? If we're an introvert and we go with an extrovert, I'm an intuitive introvert, I go with an analytic extrovert, and my donor is analytic, then I'm going to let my donor I'm going to let the person I'm with do more of the talking, because they're naturally going to talk in an analytic way. They're going to be more comfortable with outcomes, measurements, facts, and figures. If I'm with someone who wants a warm and fuzzy story, I might take over. So you can use the styles to navigate and strategize about meetings and about relationships with donors.
And by the way, we're going to show your web address, but you can go to your web and take a free quiz, right, to determine your asking style.
Right. You can go to askingmatters.com or you can go to quiz.askingmatters.com. It's 30 questions. It's free. Everyone can take it. So you can have your
show your contact information at the end.
Thank you. And everyone can then report their results to you, and you can even chart them out and get a sense of your whole board. I do this anytime I train a board. I have everyone take the Asking Styles quiz, and then I get a sense, and everyone gets a better sense of everyone else. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to get people to respect each other and what they bring to the table, right? So I want board members to understand, so we have a few mission controllers and a few of these, and we need these people. Mm-hmm. We need these mission controllers, because otherwise, with all the great ideas the go-getters have, they'll never be implemented. Mm-hmm. We need kindred spirits, because we might be looking at outcomes measurements, but we can't forget the people, and not everything is based on an outcomes measurement. Not everything in the nonprofit world is or should be done the most efficiently, because there are other things at stake, human beings. Right, and some of that's not quantifiable, so you want a balance of people. I think there was another question. Can introverts make good development managers? Yes.
Yeah. Who was that? Who asked that question, Randa?
Patricia did.
Didn't she already earn a book? But
she did.
On the fly, I'm going to say you own one book per person.
Right, but I'm going to answer Patricia's question, and that can introverts make good development managers? Absolutely. There is a bias in this country in management against introverts. And I quote an author, David Burrows. He wrote a book. Oh, I forgot the name, but it is footnoted in my book. And he's done a lot of work in the corporate sector about this, and finds that the higher you go in the hierarchy in a corporation, the fewer introverts there are. Now, maybe some introverts don't want that big visible position, but there's a lot of bias against introverts who aren't going to show up at the coffee at the water cooler as often, who aren't going to be as social with their peers and get looked over for promotions. However, introverts are really good managers, because to be a good manager, you need to stop, you need to be quiet, and you need to be looking at your reports and understanding them, and understanding the value of each person. It takes time to stop and do that.
And by the way, we talk so much about staff retention. I think an introverted development manager who's listening to their staff is going to be more likely to keep their high performing staff.
That's a fabulous point. Fabulous point. Yeah, very true. So introverts can be great managers.
Yeah.
We may shy away from it a bit because it's a lot of interaction with people. There could be some of that, but when we do it, we're excellent at it. There's no sense that extroverts are better managers. There are studies that show there is virtually no correlation between extroversion, introversion, and management skills.
Yeah.
Virtually none.
Hey, I'm itching to ask a question.
Ask it, because I'm not sure if we have
I, like you, led a lot of fundraising training for boards, okay? And I have discovered community and business leaders who are virtually fearless in everything else they have to do in their lives, are terrified of asking for a gift. Now, tell me, how does the introvert harness the courage to ask for gifts that terrifies a very big chunk of our nonprofit sector?
Well, I always start by saying this work is not easy and it is not fun. And I've been doing this work. I've been a frontline fundraiser forever. Well, let's say
some have been longer than you. But anyways,
yeah, some longer, but for my forever, and I still can find it awkward. And I ask for money for the same reason anyone does, and that's to make a difference. I'm not doing it because I love doing it. So the first thing is acknowledging that, right? And saying, okay, this is going to be awkward. This is going to be difficult for me to do. To make it easier for introverts, we should develop relationships first, right? So that we know people and people have a good feeling about us. So in a way that paves the way for us to come in and ask. We should partner, though I think everyone should partner. Probably introverts probably benefit from having an extroverted partner in terms of being able to put it out there, get to the meeting, and such. Here's another one, though. Part of it is in setting up the meeting.
Yeah.
And I spend time, I've been talking about this for over a decade now. This idea that you have to pick up the phone and call your donor is hogwash. It was 30 years ago, and it is today. Now, in the old days, when all you had was phone, great. But there were also lots of other things we didn't have, and the world was very different. But email is a powerful tool still today for communicating with donors. I have used email successfully since the beginning of email. I mean, certainly since the early 90s, I've been emailing.
Introverts like email more than extroverts?
Yes, extroverts like the phone. I joke with a friend of mine here. He always calls me. I text him, and then he picks up the phone and calls me. And we joke, and he'll say, Like he came over for lunch 2 days ago and he said, well, call me at 11 and tell me what you want. I said, can't I text you? Why do I have to call you? So extroverts are more likely to just pick up the phone and say, and they're not as it's easier for them to deal with whatever's going to happen on the other end of the of the line. Whereas introverts, for us, that surprise, that conversation that tacks in a different direction, that donor that doesn't have much time and says, oh, I was in the middle of something, how can I help you? That all of that throws us off as introverts. Whereas I can write a beautiful, detailed 3 or 4 paragraph letter that really speaks to this donor, and it's clear to the donor that I've written this letter just to them, right? That's really effective. So introverts should reach out to make meetings and converse and build relationships using the communication tools that work for them.
Yeah. By the way, I love the handwritten note.
Handwritten note, almost out of vogue, but
no, I love it because how many handwritten notes did you receive today? How many did I get today? Right? They stand out.
Yeah, I have one friend who makes these handmade cards for holidays and writes in them. And whenever I see one in my mailbox, it's so special. Right, handwritten really is a great tool for everyone. The other thing is, while introverts, right, we have to make sure we're not talking shyness, that we're talking introversion, because introverts like one-on-one conversations. Introverts, I don't think, have any more fear of asking than extroverts. It's just the energy, the thought of the energy of the meeting itself that can be overwhelming.
Hey, I'm going to give a question for you. How many presentations do you think you've given over your 40 years?
Well, I know how many webinars I've given in the last 13.
Because the question is, it appears to me you have no fear of public speaking.
It's not a fear. So I've been on at least 700 webinars, and I've been in person hundreds of times, probably 200.
You have no fear of public speaking.
I don't fear it because I know what I'm talking about. I talk about a subject that I know well. A lot of actors are
you a false introvert then?
No, because when I get up in front of the room, I'm acting, and I don't mean I'm being fake, but I'm presenting. I get in a zone and I do what I do well. Trust me, I actually would be happy if I never, ever did another webinar live presentation. I'm delighted that I'm teaching and people learning from me, and I'm helping the field, but I have no desire to be there. And I can't stand the applause at the end. As a matter of fact, it embarrasses me.
Why, by the way?
It embarrasses me. You can ask my shrink if you want. I don't know. But it embarrasses me. If I could just do my thing and walk off the stage before everyone applauded, I'd be even happier. But I don't want to do that, but I can do that well. What I can't do well.
Do you think you're getting into a role that's different than you?
Well, when you say different from you, I'm trying to make a difference in the world. That's how I'm driven. So I do a lot of things.
When you become Brian Saber, president of Asking Matters in this, you're required to play that role.
Yes.
That's maybe different than the guy figuring out those puzzles.
Yeah, I am. So when I go to an event, it's catastrophic for me. I had to go to 2 events in the last 2 weeks, and I cringed at the thought. And I was just a guest. I didn't even really have a role. And I was anxious about the whole idea of going into that room. I'm better once we sit down at a table and I just have to talk to the people on either side of me. But to go into a reception, I cannot tell you. I had a funny thing. I ran into we had our AFP chapter, National Philanthropy Day luncheon a few weeks ago. I went.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of people yet here, and I'm not going to network with them to to learn who they are because I hate doing that. So I walked into this room. I had to go clear to the other side of the reception hall to find someone I knew, also named Brian, I will say. And we joked for a minute. We were talking for a minute. He has a good sense of humor. And he said, sorry, introvert, but I'm going to have to leave you alone. I'm going to work the room. And I said, don't worry. And I turned around and said, I'll just stand in the corner, and jokingly turned around and stood in the corner of the room.
Hey, I'm going to give, you know what a strategy Andrea and myself use when we go to events as a couple, and we usually do. I always am better if I have Andrea at my side, no matter what it is. But we specifically, I want to use the hunt. We look for individuals by themselves in a corner, and we introduce ourselves to them, and it never fails.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, so here's an anecdote from the book, but I'll share it. I was a major speaker for the Grinspoon Foundation's national conference, annual conference 4 years ago. And everyone had been given my first book. Well, the reception was the night before, and I've already told you I really hate these things. I was standing against the wall on my phone, texting my friend Joyce, saying, oh, I hate this. I can't believe I have to be there. And someone just like you, Jim, saw that, and he was in a group and came over and said, I see you're standing there by yourself. Why don't you come join me? And so I went over, and another person in the circle said, wait, aren't you the guy on the back of the book? And I was so embarrassed that I was standing there by myself, and I was the entertainment, right? I was why everyone was there. And I was too shy to go up to a group and say hello.
Yeah.
So, and Haley saying, I love when extroverts adopt me. Amen. Yeah. Me too. Yeah. Patricia saying, hey, maybe I'm a shy introvert.
Randa, how many minutes we have left? I want to make sure we make Brian. Have we given away 3 books yet?
We have not, but we only have a few minutes left.
The next person who types in the chat space is going to get that 3rd book. How's that? Jim making a rule on the fly.
I'm just going back to see if we missed a question someone.
Okay, do we have, because we don't have much time left.
Asked.
And Brian, by the way, there's Brian's contact. It is a rich website, and I highly recommend that you, your colleagues, your board members, go there, take a look at the asking style quiz. And I think it's, no matter how big your organization is, what sector you're in, it's going to enrich it. And Brian, this is your contact information. And
this is it.
You might be a self-admitted introvert, but they can reach out for you. Is that right?
Yeah, don't call me. I see you on the phone there.
How about
email me? Email me, or and link to me on LinkedIn if you want. I'm much better sitting on my computer and responding than I am.
I want to give out that 3rd book. All you have to do is type something in the chat space.
Amazing.
Come on, type something in the chat space. Make Brian autograph his 3rd book, because that way he won't have as much time for puzzles tonight.
No, we're not getting anyone. So there we go.
What, will you send one to Randa?
Yes, I will send the 3rd one to Randa.
Okay, Randa, see.
Okay, we're done.
Okay.
Okay.
How much, where are we now in time?
We're Randa? At the top. We have 2 minutes. I think it's time for our goodbyes.
So let me first, John, could you put Brian's contact information up again? Awesome. Hey, Marcelo, no, we've given that 3rd book to Randa. The books are gone. And boy, we really encourage people. First of all, Brian, I want to thank you. I think you've been on this webinar the 700 times you've done it. I count at least 3. And
at least 3.
I think every time we talk, we discover that we have more in common. Okay. Yeah. And, so it is true that extroverts and introverts can find a common ground. But thank you not only for participating in this webinar, but you provide a lot of leadership to our sector. to your colleagues, to up and coming people like Randa. And I want to appreciate the books you've written, the webinars, the 700 webinars you've given, and they have enriched the nonprofit sector. And I consider myself enriched by reading your books and having these conversations with you. And I'm going to give you one warning, okay? As an extrovert to an introvert, when you do such a good job, we're inviting you back in 2024.
Okay. We'll see about
folks,
that.
We're going to have a telecast on next Wednesday, and we are working with a local TV station in San Antonio. We are going to tape that on Monday, and we're going to put that in this normal slot, but it won't be interactive. And talk about Brian, I'm terrified. You know, webinar's fine, but going into a TV studio. So maybe later I'll get some advice from you. But I want to thank Brian, and I want to thank our learning community, because you're all our kindred spirits. You commit, you know, your time, your service, your leadership, and you share one mission, and that's the touch to improve and save more lives. So thank you so much to our audience. Thank you, Brian Saber, for being a true mensch and leader in our profession. And I can't wait to catch up with you, and congratulations on being part of the Golden State.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
It was
Best of
terrific.
luck,
We just
everyone.
didn't have enough time. Thank you, Brian.
Never. Take care.